If you, like everyone else, including me, watched Wicked recently and found yourself instantly drawn into its world building, story, and songs, you might remember it looking like this: lush colors, bright and rich, that accentuate its soaring emotion. But if you didn't, you might instead remember it looking like this, how it actually did: washed out and muted much more than expected. The elements of the movie are so strong that while it might have felt like this, in reality it looked like this, and this. So what's going on here? Why is it so grayed out? I really enjoyed Wicked, but it was almost in spite of itself because of this. People have theorized widely about what's caused this, often by claiming it's due to low lighting, bad lighting, even attempting to fix it by boosting the saturation, something that clearly doesn't solve it alone. But what surprised me most watching it was the fact that the lighting, while not as bold as I would have liked, wasn't in itself exceptionally bad, and the texture of the image itself was not as flat as the promo or trailer led me to believe, nor were the colors as muted on their own. What felt evident as the cause of this washed out look instead was almost entirely the way it handles the color black. When movies were still shot in film, the color levels were already set by the film stock itself, so it had true blacks and true whites and everything in between. All the colors of the spectrum were pretty much set by the film stock itself. So that signature film look came mostly from lighting and design on sets, filters which they could put over the camera as they're shooting, and the built-in pigmentation, like I said, of film stock. That built-in pigmentation had also what's called true black. That's those deep, rich blacks you'll recognize if you watch any old Hollywood movie. From the late 90s to the mid 2000s, when movies were still being shot on film, an earlier form of color grading was still common, using a digital intermediate, which is a scanned copy of the film, which makes it easier to edit in a digital workspace. But with advances in digital workspaces came a more advanced form of color manipulation called color grading. Color grading gives a much greater control in post-production over changing the look of the shot footage. This also means that there's greater control over how deep you want those blacks to be. Early digital filmmaking, such as Pacific Rim, still tried to honor the principles of classic film, and therefore maintains a bold cinematic look with lots of its aesthetic decisions made in camera. That is, on set through more classic lighting, composition, and production design choices rather than in post-production. Somewhere in the past decade, however, the lifted black look has come to dominate cinema and TV, something resulting from the washed-out log look of an ungraded digital workstation, which has influenced the sense of what the finished image should look like. And this absence of deep blacks causes an overall lifting of the image and is often part of what's referred to as the digital look. You'll recognize the look of it and the difference between the production design choices and black levels in something like The Ring, or better yet, Sopranos, an early HBO show that was shot on film and would have had little, if no, digital intermediate editing after, a look achieved largely through filters and shooting on film, versus the look of a show like True Detective Season 1, which was shot on film, then scanned and digitally color graded. And then comparing that to something like Stranger Things, which was both shot and then graded on digital. And then comparing that to something like Pretty Little Liars, earlier in the decade, which was shot on digital, but graded with the same concepts of film in mind, such as true blacks. With this in mind, I decided to try something as an experiment. I'm not a professional or even amateur color grader, so I put the finished footage from Wicked into my video editor and just played around with the color grading with what's called a LUT. These are color grading templates that are often used on set as guidelines for what the finished product might look like, and in post-production to quickly grade footage. Using this website, I specifically looked for ones that had very deep blacks to force more visual depth and contrast into the Wicked footage, without distorting its other coloring too much either. In this way, you can see that what's missing from Wicked, and the cause of its uncinematic muted color palette, is indeed a washed out looking grade that lifts its blacks to the point it loses its contrasts, which in turn brings down the boldness and impact of every other color in frame. Because I'm using someone else's LUT, and I'm not grading it myself, I haven't perfected it, and the blacks still aren't as deep in the after image as I would prefer. There is some bad lighting throughout as well, which a grade cannot entirely solve, but it's actually much less glaring of a problem relative to how much the weak contrasting exacerbates it. Look at how lifted these blacks are. Alphaba is consistently almost dark grayish, versus how much more bold the set design and even lighting appears if the blacks are treated as true blacks. Even the notorious bursts of light in scenes such as Dancing Through Life feel less hazy and bright with a passive regrading, where they become more subtle and lend the romantic ambiance I believe they were originally going for. Some images, especially the ending, have a strong visual sense on their own, but much of the daylight shots feel remarkably improved by a regrade that reclaims the latent depth in the image if the contrasts weren't being so bizarrely smudged out. For comparison, this is what a classic movie like Wizard of Oz would look like if the same color grading sensibility was applied to it. With this, I do want to make clear that this is a trend. There is nothing inherent to the digital process that results in these lifted blacks, but it's a choice being made whether consciously or not. I doubt colorists are going into this thinking they want it to be washed out. Rather, they're starting from such a washed out image that they don't have a good gauge of how much to add back in. For them, the washed out image we see is much more vibrant than the washed out image they began with. So over the past decade, the threshold of acceptable grayness has adjusted accordingly. Alright, thank you for watching. Let me know if you'd like me to do any more videos like this, showing other movies that would be improved with grade, or showing a classic movie that would be really degraded with a new grade. And let me know if you agree or not. I obviously still like the movie, even if I think it might have looked a little bit better if with a different color grade. I enjoyed it, and let me know if you did too, or if this would have vastly improved your enjoyment also. Thank you. Bye.